When Nick told me to get involved in this and do this breakout session about videography, I was like going a lot of ideas of what I wanted to do. And I asked, who's the audience? I said, people who are keen to go into this as one of the storytelling opportunities. And because sometimes there are a lot of people who are out in the parishes and they don't know where to start. So this is largely for you. If you're in the industry, this might be something that you're already familiar with. But stick around, because at the end of this session, we may have the opportunity for some of the participants to ask some questions. And I may call on you if you have the ability to help me to share some of our industry practices and so forth. And then we can talk about it, right? So a bit of a background about me. I'm not like some Oscar-winning, Emmy Award-winning director or producer or anything like that. My career started out in broadcast TV. I was a broadcast producer. I did a live show programming. I did documentaries. And then after that, subsequently, I moved over to the corporate side and worked within the PR function, and where I do in-house production videos, as well as collaborating and commissioning productions from external content creators that come into the company that I work with, which is Marina Bay Sands, and we build documentaries and content series about the property. Okay, of course, you know, after having all this experience and started to see the digital content that was coming out of the Archdiocese, you know, I put up my hand, say, hey, anything I can do to you know, be like hold a light or to hold a camera or anything, you know, just be the hands and feet. And they say, oh, come and join FITA, volunteers in the Archdiocese, which is like talents within the industry, or anybody, as long as you're willing to try to come and join us, become part of the FITA studios, and then that's where I am today. So earlier on, you saw this Archbishop's video about why stories, okay? And I think stories are a critical part of our life. Like the Archbishop has mentioned, the Bible is a stories of stories. And stories are one way that we have an opportunity to spread the faith, share the stories of how God is so involved in our lives, rather than, you know, talk about, oh, when someone asks you the question about what is your faith about, you say, oh, you go to church on Sundays, and then there's sacraments, and then you go to confession, and then you have the Eucharist. People may not get it, okay? But by telling a story is what connects us emotionally, and then that's from where we can subsequently try to understand a bit more of the faith. So it is the entryway to understanding about the faith, right? And also stories is a way, you know, if you look at the Bible, there must be a story that you connect with, right? From Noah's Ark to Moses in Exodus, and maybe even the Passion of Christ is a, you know, it is true, it's a historical event, but some people still see it as a story. The feeding of the 5,000, of course, for myself personally, the prodigal son is a very important story in my life as well. Okay, so anyway, when we talked about sharing storytelling through videography, I kind of like forgot what my objectives was. I was like, what do I tell? What do I tell? And I started to think about maybe I can talk about camera techniques. I can talk about lighting and all that, right? Then why do stories succeed and fail? How the writing techniques for stories, and then maybe planning a campaign strategy, like, you know, you do first on Instagram, then on Facebook, and then on your website, and maybe using the elements of camera movement. This will starting to get me further and further away from what I wanted to talk to you within 40 minutes as well. Okay, so I came back and I said, okay, what do I want people who attend today to go away with? And I came up with like maybe a couple of takeaways. Okay, but first, like, you know, if you, the World Communication Day message, as what Pope Francis has said, telling our stories is to remember who and what we are in God's eyes, right? And then our stories contain marvelous things. Of course, sometimes we do have the sad part, right? But there has also a point where we celebrate when we listen to stories, even fairy tales and things like that, a well ending, all's well that ends well kind of a solution. Okay, but when we tell stories of our faith, it is not just about building ourselves up. Okay, it is building ourselves in God's eyes and bearing witness to what we want to share with what the Spirit has emboldened us as and encouraged us. Okay, So you have a camera, or someone gives you an iPad, which technology has allowed us to film videos very easily now. Even with a smartphone, you have a top range handphone, you can do that. But how to start? Do you just start recording everything and then suddenly you look at it, what did I want to tell? Okay, so we talk about how do you start the story. So in producing a video, there's actually, I think, break it down 3 parts: the pre-production phase, the production phase, and the post-production phase. Post-production phase, at the end of it, you will see the final product, the product that you will see on the screen, on the YouTube, so forth. Production phase is where you start to do, when you go out with your camera, with your lights, and film all those. Pre-production phase is a very key, important part. But what is in the pre-production phase? Yes, there's a logistical planning, there's a resources planning, the venue, locations, and everything like that. But even before that, there must be something that's worth you planning and deciding to produce. And that would be the story ideation. So today I'm going to focus on the story ideation, because to tell that story, it has to come up from that, coming together and say that, what is a good story to tell? Okay. So give you 2 takeaway methods, right? I thought about it. What can I leave you guys with? I think some among you might be familiar with this already. Okay, I give you the 5 W's and 1 H method, right? And then I give you the setup, conflict, and resolution method. So these 2 methods. And then I'll use some video examples to identify these content construction methods. Hopefully, we can identify what it is, right? So the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's the 5 W's and 1 H. Ask this question: who, what, where, when, why, how. Okay, it is a basic journalist foundation training in writing a whole story, writing a report, even in a documentary. And it is for writing the lead. The lead is like the first opening paragraph. Normally you will answer all this, right? And if you think, so who is a who, what is a what, and things like that, it is have all possible configurations of the who, what, where, when, why, how. Exhaust them. Okay, who am I? Who am I writing about? Who is going to be reading this? Who is going to be watching this? Okay, what is this story about? What is the reaction I hope to get? Right? Where is this story happening? When is it happening? Okay, when will people be watching this? Where will people be watching this? Why is this story important? Why does this story matter to the person who's watching it? Why is this story important to the person, the central character? And how? Okay, how is sometimes answering is like, how does this happen? And then how do I move on from here? So exhaust all possible angles of that, flesh it out, write it down, and then sometimes it will crystallize, and then you can say, there is my story. Okay, this helps to identify the unique and interesting, because you ask every possible configuration of the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Okay, because if you cannot answer what is the unique and the interesting, then the viewer also don't know what is the unique and the interesting. Right? Of course, you learn about communication theory, right? The interpretation of the message is on the receiver and not the one who has produced the message. But that's a different story completely, right? But when you try to tell a story within a video, you do have this anticipation of what you want the viewer to go away with, right? And that allows us to then craft that story in that sense. Okay. So the thing is, the who, what, where, when, why, how is in a lot of things that we come across. Okay, for example, this John 3:16 phrase, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. There in that passage, there are the 5 W's and 1 H. Maybe not the who, what, where, when, why, and how order, but it's all there. Okay, you take a look and see if you can identify them, right? Okay, the who, right? The why, that he gave his only begotten Son, when, right? In this time of the human existence, that whoever believes in him shall not perish. How? But have eternal life. Okay? As we come through to Easter and ahead towards Pentecost, right? We will hear St. Peter, right, at Pentecost, speak to the 3,000, right? Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene. You break down the passage. You break it down, you will see the who, the what, the why, and the how. Okay? Initially, if this was the breakout room, there was a smaller session, I would have been able to ask, some of you to respond. Okay? So this was from sorry, a bit tardy, but this was for the last week's slides. Okay? Right. Okay, I'm going to show you a video now. This is just a very easy, catchy way. If some of you are old enough, you'll remember the show The Electric Company. It's still running today because this video is not so old and not so new either lah. Okay, I'll just share this with you.
I woke up this morning to a terrible fright. My favorite hat was nowhere in sight, and I need some help to solve this mystery. You see, my name is Joel, and this here is Benj. Hey. He's not only my brother, but he's my best friend, and together with these words we'll solve this mystery. So help us figure out who, what, where, when, why, how. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Questions that will help us solve this mystery. You see, who was the person that committed the crime? What made them do it? They must be out of their minds. Where did it happen? From behind my back. When? I don't know, but I really miss my hat. Why did they do it? Because they're thieves. How could anyone do this to me? So those are the tools to solve the crime. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. And that's what you need to solve a mystery. You see, it's getting kind of close to the end of the song, so come on everybody, use those tools and sing along. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Who, what, where, when, why, how.
Hey Joel, is this your hat? Benji!
Okay, so one thing about whenever you give like videography kind of talks, right, you'll be showing a lot of video content. So there will be a couple more, and hopefully they're all out there, they're all on the internet and things like that. But what I've done is just edited them together to share with you so that it can help you in this process of where you get started in this video. Okay, I know some of you may have questions beyond this ideation part. Hold on to them. Okay, you want to write it down later on and stuff like that. I'll try to answer as much as possible, and then we can go from there. Okay, all right. The setup conflict resolution method. This one is, I think, easily also known as the 3-act method. Okay, the first act being the setup, the second act being the conflict, and the third act being the resolution. Who is very good at this? Who is very good at this is actually Pixar, right? The animation giant. And I'll show you what it means, right? Okay. So when you plan the storyline, there is a setup, okay? It's like the beginning. And then the conflict may not necessarily be a dramatic conflict. It could be a challenge and obstacle. And then how do you resolve that and come to the resolution? Okay, if I say I give you the story of the prodigal son, there's a setup. There's a man with 2 sons. Okay, then when it came to the conflict, the guy runs away, takes the money, goes to another land, then squanders it all. And then he has this challenge that he's like feeding the pig. He said, I know I could have gone back to my father, even if I'm a worker for my father and all that. Okay, but he comes back, the father runs out to meet him, greet him, restores him to his sonship. And that's a resolution. So you see, it is that you can see the breakdown of a setup, conflict, and a resolution, right? Okay, so this is essentially that. Then, of course, in between the acts, then you start to fill it in, right? You fill it in with the characters, you paint in the environment. This was set in a certain situation. What are the circumstances that create the conflict, and how to overcome that? What did the person do in the end? All right. So the Pixar storytelling framework, when you do that, essentially is an expanded 3-act table. Okay, so once upon a time, every day until one day, then because of this, because of that, until finally, ever since then. Okay, and then the last part is the moral of the story is. The moral of the story is the takeaway that you want the viewer to go away with. And they'll remember the setup, the conflict, the resolution. But there has to be some kind of like a moral of it. It is to close the loop for everyone to kind of like close the story in a nice way, right? All right, let me just share. This is a bit slightly longer. I edited the 3 things together so that we can have an opportunity to see this.
What are you trying to say in your story? When we ask this question, we're getting at something we call the theme. The theme is connected to the moral, which is the lesson that the main character learns at the end of a story. For example, the moral of Cars might be, there's more to life than winning. And for thousands of years, people have been weaving morals into stories. Throughout history, storytellers have experimented with everything from 1 act to 8 acts or more, but the most common structure for film is the 3-act structure. Act 1 consists of the first 3 steps of our story spine, once upon a time. This is where we meet our main character, known as the protagonist, and we find out when and where the story takes place. For example, in Finding Nemo, we're introduced to Marlin and Nemo, who live in the safety of the reef, and we learn why Marlin worries about the dangers lurking in the open ocean. The first act also tells the audience what type of movie they're about to see. Is it a science fiction, a romantic comedy, a historical drama, or something else? Every day. This is where we learn more about how the world works. For example, in Finding Nemo, we learn about the other creatures who inhabit the reef and what life is like there every day. Until one day. This is often called the inciting incident. It's an event which leads to a key obstacle your protagonist faces and sets the rest of the story in motion. In Finding Nemo, Nemo ignores his father's instructions, swims out to touch the boat, and is captured by a scuba diver. In order to save him, Marlin is forced to face his biggest fear, the open ocean. The first act can also introduce something called the antagonist. You probably know this as a character we sometimes call the villain, but it can take many forms. Generally, the antagonist is a force that gets in the way of your character's wants and needs. Marlin's antagonist is something that stands in his way, the ocean and his fear of it. In Act 1, you've established all the information your audience needs to know and given your characters a set of challenges to overcome. Now begins the journey to achieve their goals. Let's take a closer look at our story spine for Act 2. In Act 2, our protagonist often encounters a series of progressive complications. These obstacles force them to make difficult decisions as one thing leads to another in a chain of events we call the journey. The choices and actions your main character makes as they attempt to overcome these escalating obstacles is the substance of the second act. But how do we make sure the journey of Act 2 is more than just a series of events strung together? Act 2 may also contain the low point, when it seems that all hope is lost. Everything's gone wrong, and your character may have failed in all attempts to get what they want. Or they may have achieved everything they want, but still be frustrated or miserable because there's something else they actually need. By the time we hit Act 3, the story is now careening towards a final crisis, the inevitable climax. This is the most intense moment of the film for the protagonist, who should be in danger of losing everything they value most. Hopefully, the audience is on the edge of their seats. The choices your character has made in Act 1 and Act 2 were driven by their wants. But now they face their ultimate test. Are they ready to accept their needs and make choices they weren't capable of making in Act 1? For example, near the end of Finding Nemo, Marlin has found Nemo. This was his want and what's been driving him throughout the entire movie. But now Dory, his companion and friend, is caught in a fishing net. This is the crisis. All Marlin wants to do is take Nemo home and keep him safe, but he knows that they have to save Dory, and that Nemo has the best chance of doing that. Marlin needs to let Nemo go and trust that he'll be okay. After the climax, the characters and the world return to a calmer place, perhaps a more complete or better version of themselves. We call this the resolution. In Finding Nemo, this comes after Nemo frees Dory from the net. We return to the reef to see a new version of Marlin, trusting and confident, letting Nemo swim off to school and checking in with his new shark friends. In summary, the third act is where we pull everything together. The characters have overcome their obstacles, their arcs are now complete, the theme has been clearly expressed, and we've brought the story to a logical and emotional, sometimes unexpected conclusion.
Okay, this will not work if you are not familiar with the Finding Nemo story. Okay, but that's the way Pixar tells their story. They use this framework consistently again and again, and you can see it's also a 3-act story, right? So there are also some Catholic examples of storytelling. I will show you one video one more time. This will probably be the last video. And I've been fortunate to be part of the Landings Ministry, where we go out and we share what we call faith stories. Some of you are probably familiar with this faith stories thing, where Landings Ministry goes out and help Catholics who might have left the church, or maybe are feeling that they're not part of it and want to come back to church and try to be part of the community and celebrate again. And we share with them how God is present in our lives and what is our conversion story in that sense and what makes us come back. So I was part of that project where we work with Arch Productions then, and to build up a couple of faith story testimonials, so to speak. So this is one of them. Okay, see if you can recognize the 3-act in that. Okay, there's a setup, there's a conflict, and then there's a resolution. Okay, so the faith journey for returnee always starts with a pre-conversion, the conversion encounter, and where is the person in his or her faith right now. So when you think about whether you're in a parish or a ministry, this is like the 3-act method of telling that story. So of course, you feel that they're all going to look and feel the same, but we can address that later in the Q&A. Okay, and this is also a helpful way for us to see the God moments in our life when we start to sit down and think about it, right? And it's also a personal story which we eventually can see is connection. When you talk about the Bible and the salvation history chain, where our story itself, right, fits into that. So you can also spot the 5 W's and 1 H, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and also this setup conflict resolution method.
So after confirmation, I told the church, bye, I have my own life. Years ago, I got to know my then girlfriend, who was not Catholic. She was very interested in becoming a Catholic. She knows that, there is a God. I brought her to Church of Divine Mercy. She sat down with me during Mass. I kind of talked about how the Mass went on, and I think she wanted to convert. She signed up RCIA at the Church of Divine Mercy. I would attend RCIA with her as well. So when I went into Landings, I was a bit apprehensive. I told myself, but I'm not a returning Catholic. Sitting in the pews every Sunday or most Sundays, I'm not considered a returning Catholic, right? So I had my first reconciliation after 20 years at the Landings retreat. That moment was actually very profound because for the first time in a long time, I tasted the love that God had for me. During that sacrament, that was Jesus actually. An intimate conversation with Jesus Christ. I've learned that if I'm willing to drop that high and mighty attitude and truly run back to Him like I've got nothing, it's something that I will not be let down. I know that because my Father is merciful, I can always run to Him. And He'll always be there at the doorsteps waiting for me.
Okay, so from there, I think you can see very clearly there's a theme, right? The painting, the background, there's also one of the underlying themes. And that's one of the techniques that you use to tell the story, the part of the things that you use to color your video, so to speak, right? But you can see from the storytelling perspective, there is a setup, that conflict, but I'm not a returning Catholic, and the resolution.